When it rains, it pours for the Cleveland Guardians. Apparently, the Guardians and Twins suspended on Monday night. The Guardians already in a muddy situation as it is. We'll talk about how Monday's soggy affair with the Minnesota Twins makes things even murkier.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into a rain out, suspended Tuesday. I don't know what to call it. A slippery Tuesday, a soggy Tuesday of Locked On Guardians. A messy, muddy affair in Minnesota on Monday night has made things more complicated for the Cleveland Guardians. We'll talk about it today. I am Justin Lada, and this is Locked On Guardians. Thank you for making us your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcast. We are a proud part of the Locked On Network, where we cover your team, your Cleveland Guardians, every day from the majors to the minors, the draft, everything in between. We'll get into all of that today and this week, of course. Before we dive into today's show, I'm Justin Lada. I'm solo co-hosting today, not co-hosting, hosting. I've been watching the Cleveland Guardians baseball since I was old enough to watch baseball when they were the Indians. You can find all of my minor league analysis where I've written about the Guardians right now at the News Herald, the Morning Journal, nextgenCleveland.substack.com, and I've been in a myriad of other places previously, and here 5 days a week here on Locked On Guardians. All right, on today's show, we will get into the Guardians' outfield decisions that will have to be made. The Guardians have a lot of outfielders on their roster coming up to the top level of the roster. So we'll talk about decisions have to be made, even though they don't have any real answers on those. We'll talk about when is the right time to call up CJ Kayfus, or call up any prospect for that matter, and the things that CJ Kayfus is doing well, and some red flags to look out for as well. And of course, we'll start with how the rain suspension on Monday night messes up the Guardians' pitching and schedule worse than it already was. So, as we know, the Guardians did not have a good weekend in Cincinnati, and that was the start of a 13 games and 13-day stretch and a 10-day, 10-game road trip in 3 different cities. So the Guardians pitching was already going to be up against it, right? You already had, guys not going very deep in games. Efficiency continues to be an issue. You're going to push the bullpen even harder in this 13-game stretch. Ben Lively's down, so you're dipping into the minors with Slade Ciccone, even though he was good. All that good, not so good stuff. Now the Guardians have to come out on Tuesday, and they have to finish, hopefully, the suspended game from Monday in the 4th inning in Minnesota, and then play another game on top of that. So if that game gets played, the weather in Minnesota doesn't look any better Tuesday than it did Monday. They'll have to play those 2 games, those 14 innings of baseball, 13 innings of baseball. So they'll need an extra player. I'm assuming it'll be Zach Kent as the 27th man. Who knows how that'll go, really. They got, I don't know if they'll use Walters or anybody else. The 27th man doesn't count towards options, which is good. Maybe they'll give it to Enright. Maybe it'll be Alamon. Depends on who's really available, what they need to do in AAA as well. And they're going to need someone else to finish that game, because obviously Logan Allen can't go the rest of Tuesday's finishing Monday game. And then they got to have their starter on Tuesday, who, was supposed to be Gavin Williams, assuming it'll be Gavin Williams. He'll have to go in game 2, and he'll have to be efficient, which he never is, because the Guardians, if they play these games, are going to have to dip into their bullpen in game 1 to finish up game 1 on Monday. So will the Twins. So that does put them on even footing in terms of pitching. They're going to lose Bailey Ober. They'll have to dip into their pitching as well. But for the Guardians, that was day 4 of a 10-game trip and a 10-game stretch, 13-game stretch. So this is not ideal for the Guardians. This is going to mess them up even more. And I really want to know, being a grounds crew member of a baseball team is kind of a thankless job. It really is, of an organization. It's kind of a thankless job, because we're sitting here complaining about calls and all that kind of stuff, and they have to deal in weather reports. They have to deal in best case scenario, worst case scenario. They have to communicate with both teams, the umpires, the league, and they've got to make the best decision they can. And they have to consider player safety. So I'm understanding that as a thankless job, and there's really not going to be any great decisions made in terms of it's going to make everybody happy. But what were they doing, starting this game, and B, the second restart. That just absolutely screwed everything up. Starting that game, and I realize, again, that's why I say it's thankless, because Tuesday's forecast isn't any better. And you can't wipe out a whole 3-game series. You can't send the Guardians and Twins to Milwaukee like the Indians did in 07 during the early season snow. And they played in Milwaukee on the road. You can't do that, unfortunately. But both starters are lost after 3 innings. And you tried to restart a second time, and it was uncompetitive baseball. I mean, Logan Allen in that third inning was just throwing whatever, and the Twins hitters were swinging at whatever. And thank God, because, Logan Allen already coughed the lead back up that the Guardians had in the first inning, which, was a good hit by Kyle Manzardo, thank goodness. And a good stroke of Stephen Vogt to get Angel Martinez back in the 2 spot. They just have not found anybody in that 2 hole. And right now, I don't think there's an ideal answer. You try everybody until it starts working. And we'll talk about other options here on the rest of today's show. But I don't understand why they even restarted that game. It was just not competitive. It was sloppy, and it was going to get somebody hurt. And the Twins, already have a myriad of injuries. And this is a stretch the Guardians really had to take advantage of, right? There are going to be no excuses for the Cleveland Guardians if they play these games in Minnesota over the next 2.5 days, or whatever we're going to call it, because the Twins lineup doesn't have Byron Buxton. They don't have Carlos Correa. Now, Correa wasn't playing that great. Buxton was kind of so-so. They haven't had Matt Wallner. And now the Twins are going to be down Bailey Ober. The guy that really kills the Guardians the most is Bailey Ober, with that changeup and his location and ability to get chases. So the Guardians really have no excuse in Minnesota not to take advantage. And that being said, anything can happen in 3 games. And it's Major League Baseball. Anything can happen. Will Benson went on the heater of his life, the second best heater of his life after his 4 home run game in the minors in 2018 or 2019. I can't remember what it was. I was there. He was on the heater of his life this weekend, or second best heater of his life. That happens. Sometimes that happens. Baseball's weird like that. So anything could happen in this series too, but the Guardians don't have any excuse. They just played a not great series offensively in Cincinnati. They have to get back on track in Minnesota if they play the rest of the series. And the Twins are hurting, and they just finally lost the game. And now, in order to face Bailey Ober, Chris Paddock hasn't been good this year. They would have to face Joe Ryan if this series continues, and Joe Ryan's a really tough customer. But those are games you have to win. You have to take advantage of the Twins right now when they're banged up, finally hitting a loss, and now you're not facing the guy that normally kicks your butt the most, and Bailey Ober. But the Guardians are also not on a good side either, because, again, they're going to have to dip into their pitching, into the minors, call somebody up, dig into the bullpen, and then trust that Gavin Williams is going to be efficient and get them, 6 innings on the nightcap on Tuesday if they play. And then Tanner on Wednesday, if they play, also has to be efficient. He has to go deeper. Really got to set things up, especially because you go into the weekend against Detroit. I don't want to say it's make or break, because I don't want to say this is a make or break stretch, because it's not. This is a long season. Again, we talked on Monday's show. If you're every day or you've listened and the Twins were left for dead in April. They were horrible. And I said, you can't win a division in April. You can lose it. I thought they lost it. Well, guess what? They went on a 14-game winning streak. They're back. So it's a long season. Anything can happen. This stretch will not necessarily make or break their season, but it's really going to either help them decide whether or not decide, it's going to steer them in a direction of whether or not they have to fight really hard to get back in like the Twins did, or if they're going to buy themselves some wiggle room throughout the year. They're 25-21 as of May 19th. If they have a halfway decent stretch in this 13-game stretch, and they're already down in it 3 games, so they have to win at least 6 or 7 of these, which means they have to win, it's going to be a lot more now. It's going to be a lot harder. You have to win 6 or 7. You have to go 500 in the stretch or close to it. You can't go 500 in 13 games, but it has to be close to it. It's a tough stretch. But if they let it beat them, they're going to have a long way to dig out. And they're up against it after the Cincinnati series. They're going to be up against it with this pitching situation now because of the rain in Minnesota. And then, this is a series where Gavin Williams really has to get his crap in gear. And Tanner Bybee has to really be efficient and get things happening. They have to make adjustments. They can't go deep. They can't afford to have bad game plans because you have Slade Ciccone going to Detroit in a second start. Good in his first start, but you can't go out there counting on him to get deep with in the game. Luis Ortiz hasn't gone deep. You have to get him deeper too. And then you got Logan Allen and Gavin Williams again in Detroit. And then, you come home against the Dodgers, who are kind of struggling. They did get swept by the Angels, and they're banged up too. But this is a tough stretch. And it's not going to make or break the season, but it is going to define a lot of how these guys recover from this or how this leapfrogs them into June, because we're coming up in the end of May here, almost Memorial Day, which is kind of your first quarter poll of the season. It's when you can really check the standings. This is really going to leap them into the rest of the summer, whether or not they're chasing all year or whether or not they can kind of carry on with their own destiny, as it were, if they can come out of the stretch at least middle of the pack through it. It's going to be a big deal for them. It is. I don't like where it's starting, if I'm being honest. It's not the best start. All right, let's get into CJ Kayfus. That's what you're all waiting for. When's the right time to call him up? When is the right time to call any prospect up? We'll talk about CJ Kayfus's good things, bad things, and when is the right time, coming up on the rest of today's Locked On Guardians. We all know we are watching our money these days, and it is easier than ever for it to fly out the window on so many different things. If you ever check your bank account and you wonder, where did all your money go? Well, we got dining, we got online shopping, we got entertainment. Very easy to lose track these days. I know I'm guilty of it too, and that is where Monarch Money comes in. It has helped me. They are my personal CFO. They can be your personal CFO. It gives you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is not just any other budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So if you have the means to do so, you can stop just managing money and looking at it as something to figure out, but start building wealth and start going towards plans. It's summertime. We all want to take vacations, right? We all want to do nice things. We want to eat out in nice places. And maybe you are buying stuff for sports season for your kids, sporting equipment, baseball, soccer, whatever's going on. All that stuff adds up. You want to track it the right way. You want to meet your goals with your partner or yourself, whatever you want to do this summer. Monarch Money can help you take control of your finances. Use our code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. All right, CJ Kayfus. It is crazy to me that in the year 2025, we are talking about CJ Kayfus as the most talked about Guardians prospect on May 20th. Did not see that coming. Kayfus had a really nice year last year. He did. Hit plenty of home runs in Lake County. I saw plenty of them. Talked to him about his approach last year and playing the outfield too. He played some outfield. And he's always talked about how he played the outfield in high school and in college and a little bit in the Wood Bat Leagues, in the Cape Cod League. So he's comfortable with it. Right field is new to him this year. And I'll start off by saying the right field opportunities he is getting is worth watching. I continue to write about that over at my Substack next year in Cleveland. That the more he plays right field, the more intentional this feels. He has just as many starts in right field in Columbus as first base starts, and he didn't start playing right field till this year. Ironic, because right field's been a disaster for the Guardians. We came into the season so excited about this outfield. We'll talk about that in segment 3 a little bit more, but the opportunities are there for CJ Kayfus because Chase DeLauder is hurt, because George Valera is always hurt, and so is Chase DeLauder. And Nolan Jones. If Nolan Jones or John Kensey Noel had run away with right field and just hit the daylights out of the baseball, like we all hoped they were going to at some point, or for any consistency, probably not doing this with CJ Kayfus. Probably not. So this is a moment of opportunity for CJ Kayfus. And to his credit, he is doing everything in his power to make the Guardians look at him and say, how are we not going to use him? And there's two sides to this. I'll tell you, you're gonna be confused by the argument, but I'm going to tell you exactly how I think it goes. There's no wrong time to call up CJ Kayfus. It's not a bad time to call up. You want to call up your prospects when they're doing really well. They're hitting really well. They're confident. They're seeing the ball well. They feel their best. The Guardians, for at least 20 years ago, if not longer, no, it's about 20 years, did qualitative studies on this. I think I've talked about this before on the show. They've done qualitative studies on this. Psychology, calling up players when they're on a hot streak in the minors does lead to better outcomes in the majors. Coming up with confidence. This is a game of confidence. It's a game of failure. So when they're feeling their most confident, you want them to come up. You want to do it as opposed to an emergency situation or where they're scuffling and they don't feel confident about what they're seeing and what they're doing and their swings in a million places. Clearly not the case for CJ Kayfus. Now his strikeout rate has gone up at AAA since he's gotten there. It has come down since the initial wave. The walk rate's still really good. And I'll say this: if they call CJ Kayfus up, it's not bad. It's not, I'm not going to say it's a bad move or it's too soon, but I'm also not going to sit here and say he's ready right now and that he's the savior. Both those things can be true about CJ Kayfus. You do want to call him up when he's on a hot streak. You don't want to call him up before he's ready. And again, it's not a bad move if they call him up soon, but it's also I'm also going to say that it may not be the right time. There are things in this game that he has to work on right now. And I know people are saying, well, right field, Nolan Jones has a lot to work on. John Kensington has a lot to work on. I don't disagree with that. But guys like Will Brennan, and we're getting there with Nolan Jones, you kind of know what you're getting. You do know what you're getting. And there's no Super 2 to this either, right? This is not a Super 2 thing with CJ Kayfus. I see that going around online everywhere. This is not a Super 2 thing. This is a reps thing, and it's a readiness thing. He's got 67 AAA plate appearances. Okay? There is a bigger gap between AAA and the majors than there ever has been, and this has been going on for a couple of years now, and a lot of this has to do with the shrinking of roster sizes in the minors. It has to do with eliminating a level of baseball. You just don't have that many guys in AAA anymore who are, you got your Slade Ciconis, right? You got some guys that are hanging on, but you also have the guys that are down there, like Carlos Carrasco's pitching in AAA. You got those guys, but you don't have Max Fried. You don't have Garrett Coles. You don't have Tarek Skubals. And the only way you're going to say is he's going to get experience against those guys is to play in the majors. So I get that too. But 67 reps at AAA is not a lot. Again, this is his first time playing right field. And honestly, I think what's most impressive about what Kayfus is doing right now is the fact that he is playing a completely new position this year, most of the time in AAA, and it hasn't affected his hitting. That's probably the most important thing to me, really, is that he is still hitting lights out at AAA, and he is playing a brand new position. We've seen this in the past from Cleveland prospects. Like, I remember when this was his own thing, but the Indians tried to switch positions on Trevor Crowe in the minors and completely broke him. It just broke him. It was a hard transition. And he had other things going on too. It wasn't just the baseball side of things. There was more going on. But it is amazing that Kayfus has been able to play this well while playing a new position. That is really encouraging. You really like to see that. The other things I'll point out with CJ Kayfus are this. He's carrying a 487 BABIP in AAA. I don't know if you've noticed, if you're not looking at the stats, Aaron Judge is carrying like a 490 BABIP. Do you think CJ Kayfus is Aaron Judge? Because if you do, I don't know. I'm going to sell you a piece of land somewhere in Hawaii. I don't know. Like, as good as CJ Kayfus is, no one's Aaron Judge. No one's Shohei Ohtani. So that 487 BABIP is really, really high. And again, for context, most Major League BABIPs are 290 to 310. And there are some outliers both ways. And guys who are good hitters can push the upper levels of BABIP. But again, if you think he's on the Aaron Judge level, you're more delusional than thinking Michael Martinez was going to get a game-winning hit in Game 7 of the World Series. The other things I'm looking at with CJ Kayfus too that I'll tell you that could be a drawback here. A 28% chase rate in the minors. To give you some context on that, like guys like Josh Naylor last year and Andres Jimenez, we're talking almost 30% chase rates for them in the majors, right? So that's a very high level. Those are things that didn't go well for them last year. I know those are hard names to bring up right now, but those are things that get exploited. Now, he's not John Kensington Noel, but those are things that will get exploited at the major league level for sure. And then we're also, kind of looking at, again, the BABIP and the chase rate overall. The other piece of it, that is something you don't want to look at too much. But he's having trouble. Was having trouble with sliders, and against lefties too. So, and they don't need him to come up and be a two-way bat. He can be a platoon guy. You're not getting anything out of Jenkins and Noel, but if you replaced CJ Kayfus as at bats with Nolan Jones or Will Brennan, that could be perfectly fine too. And again, if they call up CJ Kayfus tomorrow, I'm not saying it's bad, it's not wrong, but I'm also saying if they don't do it tomorrow, it's not wrong either. Again, this is still more about long-term for CJ Kayfus, and you don't want to let your season slip away, but you also don't want to make him the savior either. They do have to find a 40-man spot. I think you can easily, I think the time has come. If you really wanted to find a 40-man spot for CJ Kayfus, I think you could DFA Will Brennan to make room for him, because at that point, you're not going to play Will Brennan in the outfield if you're calling up CJ Kayfus. So there's really no use for doing that. So if you're going to make that move, I guess there is a 40-man move available that you can just, pull the trigger on and not look back. But again, you have to be careful too. Every guy hitting in AAA, every guy hitting the minors is not the savior. Again, he has 67 plate appearances in the minors. You don't just call a guy up a couple of days, a couple of weeks into the season in the minors, or his first go around at a level. There are things you have to get used to, markers you got to pass that makes the most sense. And I realize a lot of people are saying you don't want the season slip away, you're getting nothing in right field, and that's absolutely true. It is. They do have other options they could go with if they want to go in that direction without going to CJ Kayfus. You bring somebody up before they're ready a little bit and they struggle and they go back down. Everybody goes back down at some point. And I'm not saying it's against trying, right? If anybody in right field was hitting, this wouldn't even be a conversation right now. Maybe Kayfus wouldn't be playing right field. But he is, and nobody's sitting at the major league level. So again, they can call it tomorrow. It wouldn't be a bad move. But I'm also saying if they don't call him up tomorrow or next week, that it also isn't the wrong move either, because it's not about the team. It's about what's best for CJ Kayfus. And 67 plate appearances, probably not the best test for him in AAA, considering the high BABIP he's carrying, considering the chase rate he's carrying, things he has to get used to a little bit. And you want to make sure that he has those things down a little bit more. There's never going to, there's never going to be a right time, right? There isn't going to be. Like, yeah, he's playing well, but you want to know what? This would be a great time for Juan Brito to come up too. But guess what? He's hurt. There is never really a perfect time. It's the same thing with any other decision. If you're waiting for the perfect time, you may just continue to wait. And you can't can't be paralysis by analysis with CJ Kayfus. All right. Speaking of the outfield, a lot more decisions for the Guardians. That AAA outfield, including CJ Kayfus, is about to get very, very crowded. And the Guardians are going to have to make some decisions soon, which is crazy because we don't have any answers. But it's still going to be decision time soon for a lot of guys and the Guardians when it comes to the outfield. Stick around for that on the rest of Locked On Guardians today. Hey, everydayers, or whether you're new here or whether you're tuning in a couple times a week, want to thank you for making us your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. Make sure you hit all the bells and whistles on YouTube so you never miss an episode, never miss a reaction video, all those kinds of fun things. And also make sure you're auto-downloading on Spotify, Apple, Overcast, Amazon Music, wherever you're getting podcasts. Make sure you're auto-downloading there so you never miss an episode. You'll be able to check out the MLB Squad Show in your feeds on Tuesday if you do that. That'll come out, and that'll have a roundtable of our hosts around the Locked On Baseball Network, talking about the storylines in the league. It's a lot of fun, a lot of jabs. As they say, coming in spikes up, no feelings hurt on the MLB Squad Show. It's a lot of fun. Check that out after you finish today's Locked On Guardians. Let's wrap up today's show by talking about the outfield. So we have some good news and some bad news when it comes to the minor league front. So David Fry, he's heading to AA this week. To DH for the Rubber Ducks. He can only DH this year. That'll be interesting for sure as things get crowded on the Guardians roster and if he goes to AAA and whatever he does. But the real interesting thing is that Columbus had sent down, they had Guy Lipscomb in AAA to take some outfield at bats in the short term. He's going back to AA. So there's room in the outfield in Columbus. So Chase DeLauder has to still play some back-to-backs in Arizona. There's still some markers for him to check off before he heads out, but it shouldn't be too much longer. You've got Lane Thomas in AAA rehabbing right now, and it sounds like he is going to go the better part of this week, maybe next, as he rehabs. The Guardians want to make sure he has time for that wrist to spring back into action, get his timing back, and also kind of figure out where things were when he was struggling before. So you got Thomas and DeLauder in AAA, right? George Valera is playing in Arizona right now. Probably going to be a little bit before he goes to Columbus too, but you're going to have those guys too. And you've got, Jonathan Rodriguez in AAA. You've got Petey Halpin in AAA, who actually is playing pretty well. Some weird metrics there too that I won't get into today. And then you also have Kayfus playing the outfield. And you're going to add back in DeLauder and Valera at some point. And if Lane Thomas comes back, you're probably sending down Jhonkensy Noel. And maybe Will Brennan should go down for something. I don't know how they fit all those guys in the outfield in AAA. And it'll be worth watching to see when all that happens. Maybe CJ Kayfus does come up. Maybe he does. And that alleviates some of the roster issues. It would be wild to me to see CJ Kayfus before Chase DeLauder, but the fact of the matter is Kayfus is healthy and hitting, and Chase DeLauder has not been healthy, and that's just the way things go. You got to be healthy at the right time when there's a need. There might be a need. But I will be watching to see how many reps Kayfus continues to get in right field, specifically when all those guys come back, if he remains in AAA. And I'm going to be curious to see who is there and who's not, because they've already pushed Rodriguez to left field where they don't have a need at the major league level right now. Stephen Kwan's situation may dictate that sooner than later. Next year? I don't know. I don't want to get into that because it's already rainy and gloomy and they didn't play and things are frustrating anyway. But they already moved Rodriguez to left field, showing that he is not a priority. Because if the Guardians really prioritize Jonathan Rodriguez, A, he'd be up, or B, he'd be playing right field because they would have a need. And guess what? They decided Kayfus needs those reps instead. So again, actions, not words there. But DeLauder, Valera, Halpin, Rodriguez, Kayfus, probably setting down Noel for Lane Thomas when he comes back. That's 6 outfielders for 4 spots if you include DH. Someone's got to sit, someone's got to go. I would not be surprised if he doesn't hit. If one of Will Brennan or Nolan Jones, I think it's too early on Jones, but he doesn't have options. Would not be shocked if one of those guys is off the 40-man roster when these decisions are made. Now, if you do make a decision to bring up DeLauder or Kayfus, you have to create a 40-man spot anyway, and I think Will Brennan is probably the logical one to go. I guess you could send him down and DFA Nolan Jones because you're not going to play Jones. You can use Brennan as an optionable outfielder. So I guess when you make the decision on Jones, if it's Kayfus or DeLauder at some point, I guess that does end the Jones experiment. This outfield thing, too, and Jeff and I came into the year really excited about this outfield, right? You have Stephen Kwan, who was an all-star last year for a great month of April and part of June when he came back. And then after the all-star break, he was terrible until the playoffs again, thank God. And he was great in the month of April again, and now May has not been so good to him. And we were excited about Lane Thomas. We were excited about Nolan Jones. We were excited about Jhonkensy Noel. We thought this is an outfield that might have 2 or 3 guys who hit 20 home runs. This might be an outfield that has 2 guys that can steal 20 bases. This is an outfield that can throw a lot of runners out on the bases with their good arms. That part has happened. They have a lot of outfield assists. Now, part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that they are poor in range besides Stephen Kwan, is that Thomas and Martinez and Noel and Jones, especially Jones playing center field, have very poor outfield range, but they're getting to the ball and the runners are challenging them enough, getting to the ball, going to second base, and the Guardians are throwing them out. So that's good. That's good. That's the only thing that's really worked out for the Guardians so far in the outfield. Nolan Jones hasn't hit. Jhonkensy Noel looks like Oscar Gonzalez 2.0. I mean, that at bat on Sunday after the first inning where there was walks and hit by pitches, and he chased everything out of the zone. This is exactly what we were worried about a year ago, his chase rates. Now, thankfully, again, CJ Kayfus doesn't have a Jhonkensy Noel level chase rate, but it's still a chase rate that will go up in the majors. When you chase like that in the minors, it will go up in the majors. Guys will throw you fastballs until you make them not throw you fastballs, and then you've got to make them throw fastballs again. Everybody has a scouting report. They may give him fastballs early and try to test him and see what he can handle. And when he does handle that, they'll adjust if they're smart, unlike the Guardians, who keep throwing first pitch fastballs sometimes. he'll get breaking stuff and he'll have to prove he has to lay off of it. And that's going to be hard because he's never seen breaking balls of this quality before. And he's already chased some in the minors. I would like to see more improvements. Kyle Manzardo last year had a very similar early season success rate at AAA. And he had already played in AAA before. And he came to the majors and he didn't do good. And they sent him back down. And then he came back up and he was good. And you might say, well, that's fine. Let CJ Kayfus come up and struggle. And if he does struggle, we can send him back down. He'll come back. He'll be better for it. And maybe that's true. It probably could be true. I think Kayfus can very much be a good platoon first base outfielder DH type. I really do. And like I said, there's no right time to call up CJ Kayfus. There's no wrong time to call him up either. There just isn't. He's playing well. If you want to call him tomorrow, again, it's not a bad decision. If they call him up tomorrow, it's also not the wrong decision if they don't call him up tomorrow either. Because again, he has 67 plate appearances in AAA. And there are things he can work on. And we have this backup QB syndrome in Cleveland where the guys are struggling in front of him and the prospect who hasn't failed yet continues to not get opportunities, so everyone thinks he's the savior. They want to try him next. These are metrics, again, the BABIP and the chase rate. These are things that could get exploited at the major league level, and maybe they won't. I don't know. You're not going to know until you bring them up and find out. You're not going to know. The Guardians do have some decisions to make on the outfield soon, whether it's Jones, whether it's Brennan, Thomas, Valera, and DeLauder coming back. All these decisions are going to have to come soon. And a lot of times they work themselves out. So the Guardians might be hoping that happens with these rehabs. They might be. But decision day is coming soon. Hopefully that decision will lead to more production right field for the Guardians. It has to at this point, honestly. All right. Tune back in on Wednesday as Jeff will bring you all the insights from Game 1, the rest of Game 1 between Guardians and Twins. Game 2, if they play it with the weather out there, who knows? And I know Jeff's got plenty of draft content lined up too, as well as minor league content. So tune in on Wednesday for all of that. And then Thursday, Jeff and I will be back together. In the meantime, make sure you're checking out MLB Squad Show and MLB Game Night. After every game ends, MLB Game Night starts, and you have local insights from all the hosts around the Locked On Network on your favorite team and every team in the majors as well. So check that out. Make sure you're downloading daily. Leave us a review. All that good stuff. We know it helps. In the meantime, go Guardians, go CJ Kayfus, go.